Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. With us on the podcast today is the trim queen, Jana Platina Phipps. Jana is an expert in all things trimmings and is the title of the episode of the podcast. She believes embellishment is a creative form of self-expression. Jana is going to share with us her start with embellishment and where it has taken her. Topics we cover include unexpectedly finding a passion that you weren't actively seeking, stepping out in faith and not fear, and then pivoting when needed. This was a great conversation, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Jana, welcome to Profit is a Choice podcast.
Hello, Michelle. Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
You are so welcome. I don't know if you even know this, Jana, but I first, I'm going to say in air quotes that nobody can see, met you by watching your Instagram and watching you online. And I believe it was Kim Shagnon who had met you and was putting a lot of embellishments and things out there. And then, of course, my background is in the window coverings where we love trim. And I remember, especially during the 90s and the early 2000s, trim was everywhere, right? And I'm in the South, so the more we could layer trim, the better it was. And then we kind of have gone through this phase of everything is so simple and so
right,
nothing.
Clean lines.
Yeah. Yes, it was just almost boring to some degree. Mm-hmm. And then we finally got some flat tapes back, and we're starting to see others. But I was introduced to you by other window treatment friends and just have really enjoyed watching your take on trims and everything out there. So thank you for filling up this heart with the love of embellishment when it got taken away.
Oh, thank you.
Our very straightforward window treatment time.
Thank you. Well, it's funny you should say that because I did really start my blogging and my social media to show people that even in the clean line times, there was embellishment happening. I just felt like it wasn't getting the press that it deserved and the ink it deserved. So that's really why I started my blog as Trim Queen.
That's an interesting thing. I think you're right. I do think people were still doing it. But I don't think that we saw it. Everything was so straight and clean and minimal. It just almost went from overly embellished and fun embellished. I mean, I can remember Jana doing a bedroom ensemble for a client, and I don't think there was an inch that didn't have something on it. Tassel fringe, ball fringe, some kind of something. And so then to go from, everything, Scaldinos and box seats and pillows and duvets, just kind of an over the top look to all the way down to everything was straight and crisp and clean. It was a culture shock for those of us who were in that industry. I mean, it was almost like half of our income got taken away. I know we'll talk about some of that later. Yeah. Because there was a lot of money to be made in either making the trims or applying the trims, and all of that just went away.
Sure. And it makes sense culturally from the shift, especially with the recession, because at that point, people got really stealth about, what they had because so many people were suffering. So it was really a cultural shift that raised its head in design. That's how we saw it.
Absolutely. So when did you first have an interest in trims? What was it that gave you the love of all things embellishment?
Right. So I am a Californian and I went to UC Berkeley. And after graduating, I went straight home to save all my money to move to New York City. And I took a sewing class, and I don't think my parents loved that idea, after, such intense university time. But I always wanted to do something creative. I didn't know what it was. And there really wasn't an opportunity in California at that time. So we're talking 1989. And as soon as I moved to New York, I started taking classes at FIT and Parsons and NYU, actually. Eventually, I landed a job with an accessory designer, and she had sent me on a scouting, sourcing to the garment district. And I had gone to this trimming factory, and I walked in, and there were a bunch of Italian ladies speaking Italian. There were machines from the turn of the century. Like, it was very industrial revolution, and they were spitting out these beautiful braids. I was really like, my breath was taken away. I couldn't believe that this existed in the world. And I kind of, something happened to me. Like, I got weak in the knees. It was very intense moment. And I just kind of fell in love with the place. I started developing a relationship with them. And then, not long after, maybe 6 months or so, I was able to start working with them. So that's how it started. It was something that wasn't even in my vocabulary, except that I found an old picture a couple days ago. It was me in college with like a flock of seagulls haircut and like a Ralph Lauren dress. I was going to a party, and it had lace around the collar, and I had taken off, I needed a belt, and I think I ripped off the satin ribbon from my blanket on my dorm room bed, and I wrapped it around my waist. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't even know what trimming was then. But for some reason, it had been in my life. I just didn't have the vocabulary for it.
What was your degree in originally?
Yeah, my degree is officially in social science, but what I studied really was communications. So
Okay.
that was my degree. But when I took my junior year in Italy, my year abroad. I was in Venice, actually, and I went to Ca' Foscari there. And so when I came back, some of my credits didn't transfer. So instead of being officially communications, I was social science. And I had wanted to minor in Italian and do some other things. And now I look back and I remember my dad saying, it won't matter. It won't matter. Just, get your BA and it's all going to translate. And it was great advice. And it's something that I think has served me well.
And how interesting that now, the communications piece is a big portion of what you do, communicating about trim and the love of trim and finding the words to give that feeling that you had when you walked in, sharing the visuals and the words to kind of give that feeling to the rest of us who can't be there in person sometimes, right?
Well, of course. And I think that's what's so brilliant about entrepreneurship, or if we have our own businesses, is that in some way, shape, or form, my time at Time Warner, when I worked in video production and creative services, or when I worked at La Perla, all these little jobs that I had and all my travels, like at some point they all come together and they enrich what you do today. And you have that in your work as well, as being in tech and all the things that you've done. You don't think of it at the time, but I really think that having some corporate experience really served me in what I do now, especially in protocol and professionalism. So it all comes together.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. I think the same thing, like you said, for mine. I would have never thought that I had a MIS degree and then worked in financial software and then, had a drapery workroom, bought and sold a school and put out magazines, and all of that would all come back around to what I'm doing now. But, none of it's wasted if we use whatever it is we've learned from it.
Absolutely. Yep.
So when did you realize, so you said that you created a relationship with that trim company. Mm-hmm. And then did you just start working there doing what? What did you do? Where did you go next?
Right. So I was hired to work with an Italian woman. Her name is Janetta. I consider her one of my most incredible mentors in life. And she was in charge of producing a line of accessories for Donna Karan and for Ralph Lauren. And she did a lot of other things in the factory, but she learned English coming to the United States in the early 50s watching I Love Lucy. and she was an incredible woman. I love her so much. And she didn't have the capacity to write specifications and to write English. So I was hired as her assistant to kind of project manage what we were doing at the factory for these fashion houses. So that's, I remember I didn't even have a desk. I had like a box, like one of those, they're kind of like a tray. It was a cardboard box. And that was, it was almost like being a cigarette girl. Like
you just picked it up and moved it around to wherever she was, right?
Exactly. And I shadowed her, I learned, and eventually, we were a great team. It was an amazing opportunity. And as I got more deeply into that business, I realized it was during the rise of Martha Stewart. I would say it was probably around 1992, 91, 92, and Martha was really in her heyday. And I thought, well, why are we just doing fashion stuff? Like, why aren't we doing home stuff? And then at that point, I was taking a course at NYU, and I wrote up a very simple business plan, and I pitched it to the owners. And Franklin, who's an older guy, and this is old school garment district, and he like had a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and he read the business plan with his partner Richard and said, okay, kid, yeah, let's give it a shot. Like, they were just like, whatever. I don't think they didn't know what it was going to amount to, but I was really serious about this. And eventually, a couple months later, I got them to finance a trip to High Point. And when I went to High Point, I remember I got like an industry badge, and I got to see showrooms, and it's not what it is today. It was kind of a shadow of itself, but I did see opportunity. So once I went there, I said, that's it, there is opportunity here. And I started to design things within the factory, cords and fringes and braids that were more home dec oriented. They were larger in scale. I had to put tapes and lips on all the cording, and I came up with a collection. And it was January, let's see, this would have been a couple years later. It was January showtime, and I shipped 600 pounds of trim to Market Square. And that was my launch, and people just went crazy for it. And I really got to see what people liked, what was applicable. And that's really how it started. And during that time, I did, it didn't rise quickly. I was having to still do all the fashion stuff and manage. I produced a hair accessory line. I did a lot of other things for them while I grew this other part. And then after a while, it became large enough where I was able to let go of the fashion and really concentrate on home.
Wow. And they probably didn't have an idea of how big it could be.
Michelle, they had no idea. They also really didn't perhaps know what I was made of. At this point, I was living with an artist, and he was very successful. And he probably made, in a month what I made in a year, and it was a little tough on my ego. And I had other friends in business school that would just say, Jana, quit your job, start a business. And I couldn't. I didn't really have a safety net. And I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't exactly sure, and I didn't have the money to just do my own thing. But I had this factory at my disposal, and it was working, and it was growing, and we were hiring new people, and I got an assistant. I transitioned them from handwriting invoices to a computer system. I went to FIT. I learned what style numbers were. Like, I was able to kind of use this as my business playground, really to trial things, of which they completely benefited from it. I built up to 8 reps. I had 8 reps nationally, and they were running the production part, but they weren't really running any of this sales management and business part. Like, that was completely me. And it was mutually beneficial, for sure. And that's how I got my feet wet. But I think my point that I wanted to make was, I did not have the luxury, I don't know if it was a luxury, but I didn't have failure in my mind at all. Like I was going to make this work because this was my best guess. I saw the possibility, and I don't think the owners really knew how dedicated I was to this working. Like I was going to make this work.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that, I'm going to say, dedication to the idea, do you think it was that strong, some of it because of your youth at the time? Or do you think you just in your gut knew that it was an opportunity that couldn't be missed? I say that because I know in my younger days, there were things that I would have fought for harder than maybe I would fight for them now. And you know what I mean? It switches around, or you don't even see the opportunity of failure. That's like, you hear people all the time who say, I'm so glad I didn't have a full business plan. If I'd have done that, I probably would have never started my business. Or I'm glad I didn't know what could have happened, so that I just pushed through. Do you think it's because of age? Do you think it was because you didn't know? Or it was just you knew in your gut that this was an opportunity to like blow it out of the water?
I think it was two things. I think part of it was age. I had the energy. I wasn't married. I didn't have a family. There was times during market, my friend Sarah from Carol Bolton, at the time, I was working so intensely for them that I slept on the cutting table, because I would work till 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I was afraid to go outside in the garment district, in Times Square at 1. So I couldn't do that now. There's no way I could do that now with a family. But at the time, that's what I did because I was so bent on making this work. And I saw I saw what was happening. My income was increasing. We were hiring people. I had to hire their first real production manager. I saw these incremental signs like this was going to work. And then just the money started coming once we started to gain success, and I had negotiation, and I could see that this was a totally viable thing. It was super, super exciting, and I could travel a lot. I could be with my reps. So part of it was youth, that I had the time and energy, and also, to be honest, like I was on the verge of an eating disorder because I think it felt so out of control, like everything that was happening and how hard I was working, that I was super controlled in my workouts, in my eating. I mean, when I look back at it now, I can see that that's how I could control things at that time, which eventually I was able to loosen that up and got some therapy around it and kind of got off that path, which could have been a scary path to go on for my health. But that was the kind of intense time it was. And it definitely was age driven. But you know what? I'm in a situation now where I have some opportunity, and I'll put the kids to bed and I'll work till midnight. I'll work till 1 because I'm excited about it and I want something to grow. But it's not at that level of intensity, because at that point it was like, if this doesn't work, I don't know what the heck I'm going to do. Now
Right.
I'm at the maturity where I'm like, if this doesn't work, well, I know that, it's not the end of the world. I know that,
Right.
I have the experience that something else will happen, and I'll keep on track.
So I've been through multiple times in my life of those types of intensity. And I have found that the older I get, and you and I were just talking beforehand, we're the same age. When our son just started working his first job out of college within the last year and a half. And my husband and I, we were together when we started right out of college. Like you said, we were the same back in 89. And I can remember us working all day. We were both in software. He was at IBM and I was at Dun & Bradstreet. And I mean, we would, even right after we got married, it was not uncommon for us to come home at 2 and 3 in the morning,
Right.
where we had been at work since 7 a.m. the day before, because that's just what it took when you were starting and you were trying to prove yourself. And that also was a sign of the times back then. People worked a whole lot more, it seems, in hours, right?
Right.
And we didn't have an idea, or at least I don't think most of us had the idea of a work-life balance. Work was a large portion of what we did. And, we had even said to our son, don't be surprised when you first start if the hours, and there's a whole lot more that takes up your time than just like going golfing or hanging out with your buddies. It's going to be work. And so, I remember that. And I remember that being, like you said, a very intense time. And then for me, as I've started to have my own different companies and launch things, I've had times I can't always stay up till 1, but sometimes I might stay up till that and then get back up at 4:30 or 5 because my brain turns on and I'm so excited. I can't wait to get up and come down to the office and start churning out what's going through my head. But I know that for me, I have seasons of that, and then I have to stop. Like I can't maintain that.
Right. It's not sustainable. I like how you say
not.
that. It's seasons, and it's not. Yeah, it's not sustainable. I can feel it when I'm getting burnout. And,
Same. Yeah. So how long did you stay with, well, let me back up and say this.
Yeah.
I bet I can just imagine the glee on your face and just the warmth in your heart at taking this, what did you say, 600 pounds of trim to High Point and
Yeah.
having people see it and start oohing and awing. And then I bet their brains started firing on how it could be used and what they could do.
Right.
I mean, all of that hard work. And then to show it to somebody, it's like putting your first baby picture out there and go, tell me my baby's pretty, right? And you're showing them this baby, if you will, that this business baby that you've birthed, and they're all oohing and eyeing and excited. That had to have just been a rush.
Oh, it was. It felt like validation, like, okay, this is going to work. Now, like, what's the next step? So it was a thrilling time. Actually, I think it was right near my 30th birthday that happened.
Wow.
At that point, I had built it, and we were ready to launch, and it was magic. Yeah, because you're getting that feedback, like you're on the right path. And I was a ranked tennis player in California, and as growing up as a junior, and I didn't get back to tennis until my daughter was a couple years old. And it's almost like being on the tennis court. Like you get over this little hump where you're like, okay, I'm completely motivated and I'm focused, but I can relax a little.
Right.
I can relax into this. And I follow this one guru. His name is Happy Bala, and he calls his strategy, it's actually very Buddhist, and he calls it relaxed intensity. And that's where I try to be, this idea of when you're really in flow, and I can be intense, but when you're relaxed, that's when you really are working at your peak. And I think that was one of those moments.
I would have to think too that showing the product, having it have such favorable excitement, towards the launch, had to have also started, like you said, building confidence that you were in the right direction, doing the right things and leading that company in that particular area in a way that was going to be beneficial and to grow.
Right.
And that confidence then allows you, I just did a podcast on confidence where we talk about the more you put it out there and the more you do it and the more you try, the more your confidence grows in that particular area. So I have to imagine that all of these were stepping stones to keep moving you forward.
They were. And one thing, I had the confidence also because I had this factory behind me. It was called Gelberg, Gelberg. And I had this, factory of 75 people to support it. And what was interesting, and I didn't think of it at the time, but they were used to working with fashion. So everything was like super fast. Things were very custom. And so it was this really cool for the home market where I could work quickly. I could customize things quickly because the factory was used to it. It wasn't just spitting out a collection, but it was used to this collaboration. And I think that really set the tone for the rest of my career of collaboration. And
that is very different than what we see in that industry where you have the big collections and there are certain colorways and that's all you have. But if their process already allowed that quick pivot and, as you said, a collaboration, that is a different model for sure.
It is. And I think that that fuels me all the time, because I see that, your team isn't only your internal team, but your team is your clients too. And that's always been super important to me, because it's those collaborations that always push design forward. It's working with um, other people's point of view. And I think that when I do my workshops, like, that's my greatest joy. It's not always what I make, it's seeing what people make with my materials. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that. Like, that's so brilliant. And I get to take that away. And I really thrive on that.
So how long did you stay there, and what prompted you to take the next step in your career?
Yeah, so I stayed there about 10 years. And what prompted me was I had had my daughter, and it was probably the first time in my life where I actually thought I might not be able to handle this. There had been nothing thrown my way up until I was 34 years old that I couldn't hack. And she was a really difficult birth. She was colicky. I had 6 weeks maternity, which I was in no way, shape, or form ready to come at after 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, and I was pumping, I was exhausted, I was commuting, and Michelle, I was a wreck. I mean, I look back at it. I mean, it was hell. And so I went in to talk to the owners, and I wanted to talk to them about perhaps taking a Wednesday off or working from home on Wednesday. Like, I just needed a break. And at this point, I would leave my daughter with my husband was taking care of her at this point. And I would leave them. I had a beautiful picture in my mind, and I had just pumped my milk, and I all ready to go to work. And he has her, in the bed, feeding her a bottle as I left for work. And then I'd come home, and then, within an hour she would be ready for bed. So I was really distraught, and I was torn about this, because here I wanted to become a mother, but I felt like I was failing as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
So I went in to discuss with them having this Wednesday off, and one of the owners said, "Well, what's your problem? Like, Kelly Ripa was back to work after 2 weeks." And I just bit my tongue, and I left the room, and I went into a stairwell, and I just bawled my eyes out. You know how emotional
Oh, I do.
anyway. And so that's when I was figuring out, I'm like, I can't have a conversation with this person. Like, that's not it. You can't even, where's
That's
the
right.
starting point? You know what I mean? So that's when I planned my exit. And my exit really wasn't, it wasn't cut and dry. What I did is I became a consultant, because I couldn't walk away from that income. My husband was taking care of my daughter, who's doing a little bit of freelance work, but that was his job. That was our agreement. So I couldn't walk away from my income. And also, I'd built it up from 0 to $4 million in sales, over those 10 years. And that was my baby too.
Right.
So I kind of had a gradual separation where I became a consultant. I took on a couple different lines, and I had a business coach at that point to help me navigate that. I had another business coach who helped me come up with another business plan if I were to leave. And eventually, when she was 2 years old, I separated from that business, because I felt like it was no longer sustainable, and I was losing my daughter's childhood.
I came home. I don't know if you've heard part of my story. There's a similarity there. I came home when my youngest was 1. My oldest was 2, 3.5. Actually came home the day before my son's first birthday.
Mm.
And my husband and I were both, of course, in software, and we don't have family around us who were able to help. I mean, he has one brother here, but they were all working, right? So we didn't really have anybody. And we were taking them to daycare in the morning at 6:30 to 7 so that we could fight traffic across Atlanta to get to work, leaving, picking them up, coming home, putting food in their mouth, giving them a bath, and putting them back to bed.
Right,
And
right, Michelle.
it was horrible for us. Now that might be beautiful for other families, but I just ate I ate, and I felt like I was missing all. And back then, it's not like we had cell phones and things the same way, so it's not even
Right.
like they could take pictures of the things my kids were doing, and I could see them. And so when my company went through, I think I was on the 16th round of layoffs, because we had been bought and sold and bought and sold, and so many things were happening, and they were cutting out my division. And when I came home, I was just like, and I'm like you, I make great money, but I could not go back to that. I just couldn't do it. And so I knew I had to change and do something different that allowed me to be mom and wife and do some of the things for my family, but also be able to express myself, right?
Right. Right.
In my own way with my passion. And so it's been a beautiful ride, and it looks like yours has too, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't come with some really tough decisions,
Oh, sure.
right, along the way.
Right.
So when you started your first company after leaving them, what did that look like?
It looked like, so I called it's called Home Couture Collective, which is my current company now. And what I started it as was a design, branding, merchandising agent company. So what I was looking for was for companies that were also manufacturers that, there's some kind of translation that has to happen between what a mill can produce and what the market wants.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like I had that skill and that ability and that talent
You could
to
speak that
bridge.
special language between the two.
Exactly. So that's how I started it. Luckily, or not luckily, I mean, it was by design. I had saved a lot of money to start this business. So I had a cushion to start. There was a gentleman that I had been collaborating with through Gelberg, where he made certain items of trim, we made the other, and then he packaged it and sold it. And so Stuart Gans was starting at the same time with a young family, Classical Elements. So he tapped me to do consulting for him, to do some design, and then to bring my clients, my sales, to kind of bring that on board. And it was the right timing for me. I couldn't do it while I was working at the other company. So that's when I made the jump. And that's how that started. And we collaborate to this day. I'm an agent for Classical. And that became like grew to be my main gig, is consulting and doing agent work for them.
And so I know that you said you had a cushion when you first started,
Mm-hmm.
and that was part of the reason that you didn't want to leave at the very beginning, was just trying to get all that in place. But so you did that, you have a cushion. When you went in and worked with your coach at the time to create your business model, I'm assuming you had a profitability plan as
Oh,
part
yes.
of that.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
and how did that work out for you? And did it follow along what you had planned? I mean, I know we always have to adjust, and the business plan is
Sure.
never 100%. But how did you, when you saw that plan and you worked on that plan and built it, and you looked at the profitability kind of forecast that went with it,
Mm-hmm.
did that make you feel comfortable? And
Yeah,
did it work out the way you planned?
it gave me the confidence to make the jump because I could see it on paper, so it did give me the confidence. It totally did not work out in those terms of what the paper said and in real
Right.
life, which, as
It rarely does.
yeah, it really does. So there had to be some pivots there and some
Mm-hmm.
adjusting, but I think in terms of that profitability plan, it gave me the confidence to make the jump, and that's really what I needed, because I knew that I was going to make something work. I didn't know exactly how it was going to work. And again, as you get feedback from the market, then that's where you have to find the opportunity and pivot. And then, the market changed, and, there are a lot of variables, but it did give me that confidence to make that jump. But no, it absolutely did not work out like my business plan. Absolutely not.
Right. And so I think that's that's just a key point I wanted to make, is sometimes we create these plans, and I kind of say we need to create them as best we can, but we also have to hold it loosely and be willing. You use the great word. We have to pivot. We have to change. But that means that we need to always have an eye on our financials and an ear to the market to know when to move and when to shift. If we're not looking at it, we don't even know how to do that.
Sure. And one thing I was thinking about, looking back on my experience is, in the early days, I did not, when I was first working for the factory, I didn't have to make a lot of money. Like money was not my driving force. It was really about a creative environment, a learning environment. It was about building a business. Like I didn't have that pressure. But at the second juncture, with a young daughter and a house and a family, like the stakes were a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
And even now, like so my daughter's turning 16, so that was 14 years ago. Now I'm at another pivotal point, transition, and the stakes are much different than when they were 12 years ago. So it's it's no longer just about, it just feels like in the beginning I was just like creating stuff and it sold. It's just like I did stuff and it sold, and that's not what the market is right now. Or maybe it could be. Like I feel like I can't be as creative as I was because I can't take those risks like I did back then.
Right. And I do think that changes. I know I'm with you. We made even lifestyle changes when I chose to come home and to manage the family and even to start a small business out of the house. We made lifestyle changes. And then, the stakes have gotten higher and higher. When I made some major business changes in 2009, my husband was between jobs at the time. His company had gone under. And so he was looking for a new opportunity. And then, even a few years ago, it was okay. We've got 2 college tuition bills getting ready to come up for 2 kids for,
Right.
9-10 years to get everybody through school. So the stakes are always shifting and we have to shift with it. But the market shifts too. And that's where I'd like to talk about for a minute now. Like I'd mentioned, and even when you started, I started my window treatment business back in 2000. Certainly I was sewing for myself in the 90s, but in 2000, and that was when the Southern Living patterns were out. And I mean, everything was covered buttons, like I said, French, there was stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
And then we went through the recession and everything went down to very straight, clean lines. And I mean, I've always laughed. You go out to Texas, they still love their trim, right? Every picture I see from Texas loves their trim. And I'm starting to see some of it come back. You I know, watch the market on trim a whole lot more closely than I do, but tell me kind of what you've seen in that. And you're right. I think our political and economic climate, it always plays, and it plays into our coloring that we use in our home, and it plays into the textiles and the things that we use in this creative business. What are you seeing with this resurgence? Because let's hope some of the really pretty stuff comes back.
Yeah. So you alluded to this previously. I do a history of passementerie and embellishment lecture at the New York School of Interior Design. And I have this one point after I go through the history and the ateliers in France, then we come up to modern day. And after the recession and all the clean lines, I call this phase the rise of the tape. So
yes,
that's kind of what happened after these clean lines. And part of that is economic, in that the furniture manufacturers, as they were, trying to keep up with their market, instead of say buying a print or a woven multicolor, like they were using a lot of their base cloths, and then they could invest in a 2-inch, a 3-inch tape to embellish a pillow, to put at the bottom of a skirt, to do as treatment for the leading edge. So it became almost like this strange economic impetus. This is like cultural anthropology of decorating, right? So that's when the tapes started to come into play, because what they were clean, but it was a way to either introduce a subtle color or a pattern, but it wasn't a lot of investment in not only like a whole sofa. It could be just a touch, but it's also was monetary,
Right.
under $10 a yard instead of
Well,
being.
and in that time too, I remember that's when there were lots of print fabrics that we used. I mean, I remember it was rare for me to get a solid fabric in the early 2000s. And
Mhm.
towards the end of 2000, almost everything that came in was like a solid white, gray, blue, beige. I mean, everything went
Yeah,
solid. And so then,
it was an all neutral, right?
right, super neutral.
Hmm. Yeah. So, which is also, I think what's happening in design now is everything's so niche. So we still have the neutral. So we still have the restoration hardware. Like that is still totally happening.
Hmm.
At the same time, at Trim Queen, we say that embellishment is a creative form of self-expression. And that's how I see designers using in their work, in their layering, in their fabrics, in their trims. Like I see their charge is really to their client and expressing their client through all of their fabrications and through their design. So in doing that, this is where we're seeing more trims. We're seeing more layering of artwork and pattern. And this is the rise in maximalism. Like Gucci exploded on the scene, 2 years ago with this pattern play with all these textures. And the same thing is happening in design because you can still have those resto people, but you have this whole other uh, you have all these niches of other people who you have the rise of the DIY people and people want to express themselves. And now they're wanting to express themselves in decor, not just in their fashion, like more than ever. And because of customization, people can do that like they've never, ever been able to do it before. So
I
it's a
think
super exciting time.
yeah. I mean, even when you think about it, I remember in our first home, back in the 90s, we had wallpaper everywhere. I mean, if it was a solid surface, Jana, we wallpapered it. I'm not even
I
kidding.
love it.
It just everything was wallpaper. It's just what you did. And
Right.
then I remember going through the phase of having to take all the wallpaper out. And then now we're seeing that wallpaper again in a lot of big and bold patterns is making a resurgence. So this color and this boldness, and then you watch that we now have like the rise of, as to use one of your terms, of some of these opportunities to do digital textile printing.
Mm-hmm.
So the homeowner, the DIY market can design their own things, send it off to one of these companies and print their own wallpaper, print their own fabrics. I can imagine there'll be an opportunity, if not already, they can, collaborate and make their own trims to go with it. So
Exactly.
there is a lot of opportunity for that expression and for that creativity, not just to be done by maybe elite designers, but to be done by everyone.
Right. And I think that's what this new small batch mentality is. And you have these companies that are rising and people want something really unique. They want something handmade. And that's the whole maker movement. Like when designers are designing, they also realize they're bringing in antiques, they're bringing in handmade things like that for their clients because that's what gives a room soul. That's what really gives it soul. And so there's this whole small batch production of whether it's textiles or whether it's trimmings or artwork, like whatever it is, this small batch, they're giving these
Mhm.
big distributors and jobbers a run for their money because also, and I see an opportunity there for designers, not only to customize, but also to customize for their brand.
Right.
I'm working with a client now that specializes or has a big project with model homes. So she wants to create some trimmings because she has the opportunity to do these model homes with her branding.
I love that.
It's brilliant. So I'm working on a package that will be available to designers to create almost like a branding opportunity of a proprietary product for them. That's kind of one of the big projects that I'm working on this fall.
So is there an area of passementerie or anything that you just love is it that you mentioned at the beginning that you really love the collaboration piece. Is that still what thrills you?
Yeah, well, I would say, I love the collaboration because then that's, when I do my workshops or when I do speaking or panels or whatever, my favorite thing is everybody has a story about a trim. Like a designer will come up to me and like, I remember that Brunswick trim from 1996 and it's still on my inspiration board. Like there is definitely a book in that. It like keeps me up at night. But I love that everybody has like this emotional, yummy, like, uh, love of something that they've held on to. So I love that. And then where I'm the bridge, and I think, this kind of harkens back to my factory days, is that I love to figure out with all these machines, like what can this machine do? Okay, what innovative yarns, if I'm in Bologna going to, or Firenze going to these yarn fairs, like what's new and innovative in yarns that I can put into this old machine to make a modern project, and then how can I bridge that with what design is wanting. So if I'm working with this designer, like how can I bridge all these things and create something where I'm pushing the boundaries of the engineer and what they can do with the machine? Like, oh, Jana, I can't do this. I'm like, yeah, let's try it. And then, no. And then the next day they give a little and they elevate and I compromise and we come to something and it's like, oh my gosh, like we just invented something. And it's because everybody is collaborating to this process. So I think you're right. I think it is the collaboration part. And I like to say it's manus machina, which is hand and machine. Like I really just gush at when a machine is elevated by what human hands can do, because the machine can't do it on its own. And the hands, we can't do it on our own. So even if like if there's a tassel fringe, the header is made by machine, but then all the tassels are handmade. So I think that's my favorite type of passementerie is when there's an element of hand and machine at the same time.
I love that. So I want to talk about, first of all, I want to thank you for continuing to work in this industry and to push the beautiful embellishments that are available in the home market, because I came from like I said, the workroom background and the design of window treatments and pillows and bedding and home textiles. And I'm telling you, it makes a difference. And people do have a connection to them. I can remember even just creating a little bench, and we just put like a little white ball fringe all the way around it. And it was like an antique bench with this little yummy. And I still remember that. I mean, I still look at that and think that is so yummy. And let's talk for a minute so that our listeners, both the designers and the upholsterers and the drapery workrooms, because that's a big contingency of my listeners. Let's talk about how using and specifying these trims adds to their own profitability. So we've talked about the profitability of collaboration, right? We've talked about the profitability of even creating something different than maybe what was already in existence. We've talked about creating a profitability plan for your own business and having to tweak and pivot. But working with these things and adding them to projects also adds to the profitability, not only of the designers and the workrooms and all who are using them, but it adds to the beautiful, I'm going to say, the profitability of the space for the homeowner or for those who are going to be receiving the goods. And so we don't want to miss that. It's like when we used to always have these conversations at IWCE or different places. Don't forget the windows. Don't forget the windows. There's so much money to be made at the window. And out of fear, many designers leave the window bare. And so now what I want to say is, don't forget the trim. Don't forget the trim. So talk to us about how it adds to the value of the items that we're creating in the homes.
Sure. So I'm actually working on a presentation for IWCE in March 2020 about this subject. And really, from a design point of view, you have to have this layering to bring that value to your client. If something is just plain on plain, everything looks like ready-made, and it's going to have not have the success as if something was layered. So, you know, in dollars and cents, what I suggest to people is that, you know, some trims, again, whether it's machine made or handmade, that's all, when I go through my seminars, I really teach people how to look for that, what's good, better, and best, and how you can deconstruct textiles to really show your client why something, it costs what it costs, you know. And I'm sure that workrooms, you do that in your labor too, right?
Mhm.
You do
Yes.
good, better, and best. So I put it in terms of when you're presenting a trim, and I have some great Pinterest boards that give ideas of fabrication, but you do a good, better, and best. So it can be really up to the client to choose, you know, where the budget's at, because of course you're going to make money on labor, you're going to make a markup on whatever trim it is that you use. So it's there. It's like leaving money on the table. To not trim something out is literally leaving money on the table. So, but you can put it in terms of your sales, and your presentation is a good, better, and best type of scenario in order to push that sale, because it is going to make it more successful
Hmm.
in a room for design, whether it is the window treatments or the upholstery. You know, and now people are even upholstering walls and
Right.
bookcases.
Headboards.
Everything
Yep.
has, you know, whether it's a tape under nail heads, or whether it's a fringe with a separate tape header on top. I mean, there's just a million different ways. It's just up to your creativity.
So, because I teach pricing and have since 2007, and am screaming at everybody in the gentlest, kindest way possible to make money at what we do, I want to take what you said and I want to have a direct conversation for just a minute with our workroom listeners. Because this was an aha moment for me. I'm talking 20 years ago when I started. First of all, if a designer brings you a ready-made trim, so a trim that they have purchased, similar to what Jana's been talking about, and they bring it to the workroom, I mean, there's a different pricing based on whether it needs to be hand sewn, machine sewn, or some type of an adhesive to hold that trim on. And so we need to think about that. But I also want to encourage the workroom that if you are making a trim, which could be cording or your own banding, please charge to make it and charge to apply it. I saw so many workrooms that were making their own trim, Jana, and not
Wow.
even realizing that they should be charging to make it and to apply it. And so one of the things that I just keep saying is if the designer brought you a trim to apply, you would charge for that. So you need to charge to apply a trim that you made and charge to make the trim. And there shouldn't be an apology about that. That's just work product. So I just want to throw that out there in this conversation, because that's a big issue on the workroom side, is not understanding that making a cording and applying it are two different pricing opportunities.
Absolutely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So for somebody, let's say that we've got this new batch of designers and workrooms that have come in during our, what do I want to call it? Our solid and tape phase.
Yeah.
Right? So they haven't had a lot of experience
True.
with embellishments or with layering or when to use or how to use or where to place them. You know, all of those things, how to choose them. Where should they start to kind of get an education and get an understanding so that they can then, and I love how you said it, it's the layering. We think of layering the room and the space, whether we're designing or staging, all the time, right?
Right.
Now we need to think about layering at the windows and on pillows and other home textiles. Where do those designers start? Where should they kick off their education for this?
Well, I think, you know, I call this trim spotting. So it's one of my hashtags. So when you start to be cognizant of trimmings and passementery, once you have that awareness, now when you're looking through any shelter magazine or you're looking on Instagram at rooms that people are posting, you'll start to see it. Like, it may not even be on your radar and you're just kind of glazing over it. But once you become aware of trimmings as a tool, you'll start to see it. as in shelter magazines, in photography, you'll start to see it. So first is that awareness. So you start to see it. And then as a designer, you should be deconstructing these rooms anyway. You know, whether you're saving it to Pinterest, whether you're putting it on your Google Drive, these images, like just start amassing images of things that speak to you, things that are aspirational to you. And then I think, you know, you really start building your Pinterest boards. So, you know, I have a lot of fabrications on my Pinterest boards, you know, broken down to decor or fashion, or even as fringe-tastic or tasselicious or what have you. So there's a lot of different, there's so much on Pinterest, even technical, like I have window treatments, and I'm repinning people's technical stuff, their fabrication. Like that is the best way. Now, it doesn't always have to be public. Like if you don't want other people to see what you're
Right.
accumulating, then you keep it as a secret board, which is also fine too. But you want to, this is just like another thing to have in your professional toolbox. So I would say, you know, first is the awareness. You start trim spotting, you start deconstructing these rooms and why they're successful. And then you start really amassing photography or, you know, reference for yourself, you know, for all the different fabrications, because it doesn't even have to be a fabrication, like design that you like. You can just be looking for fabrications, you know, because you're going to translate that into your project and into your textiles. So I think, you know, I say sometimes I'll get disappointed when somebody says they don't want to look at my line, because I think that it's your job. Like it's your job to know what's in the marketplace. You know, it's okay. You can say no, that it's not for me, but I think you should have, you know, all of this as reference, and then you translate it what's right for your style, for your business, and for your client.
I agree with you. I can remember even years ago just looking at embellishment on clothes, and I did what you did. I would take pictures everywhere. I would be walking through the store and I'm like, hold up this dress, hold up the bottom of that, and then go back, and it literally sparks ideas of what you can do, you know, in other areas using that same, like you said, the deconstruction of
Right.
it. So that's a really, really great reminder.
Yeah, and as you said, it's not even necessarily industry specific. You know, it could be something from artwork, it could be something from appliances, it can be something from technology, it can be something from trade shows, from window displays, like whatever it is. Like as a designer or workroom, like you are looking for fabrication.
Mm-hmm. So what's one of the next big profit goals in your business? What are you doing next, Jana? You're not sitting still. You're never sitting still.
No, I am not. And I was talking to my intern, to Ava, about it yesterday when we were traveling back from a meeting, and I'm on this path and I'm growing this path, and it is multiple revenue streams. And I had to explain that to her. But I think, you know, as a creative, and as a business person, that's really my goal. That's what I've started to build because of
Mm-hmm.
my brand. I saw the opportunity there to, you know, capitalize on my branding, and some collaborations there, whether I do writing, whether I do events, I'm doing my tours, you know, that's all generating income. And then I have my sales, with commissions on sales. And then recently I took on a fashion project. So this is going to be another revenue stream. And I'm super duper excited about that. But I do want to kind of back up, you know, it started happening, you know, maybe 2 years ago when I saw that as trim queen, I had some opportunities to do some things that I really, really loved, and I could generate income from it. So that started to open up as a stream. But then this last year, I had one of my biggest clients declare bankruptcy.
Mm.
So I lost a huge, I would say about a third of my income, Michelle. Like it
Wow.
is painful. And when you talk about a lifestyle change, yeah, our house is on the market. And I and then that kind of pushed me to look for, other ways that I could
Diversify.
exactly it. So doing this fashion project is a way that I can diversify. I see a lot of opportunity in it. I'm super excited about it. I also think it feeds other parts of my business. So,
Sure.
I keep things exclusive, mutually exclusive. Um, and but they all kind of go together and work to my strengths.
Right.
They're that
Right.
I can grow, on their own path. So that's my goal, is to really grow each of these streams separately, and really stay passionate about all three of them.
I think that's a good reminder too, Jana, that, you know, like let's say that you're a designer and you only have one really big client. That one really big client goes away and it can be devastating. I have a coaching client that happened to, and it can be devastating.
Oh yeah.
So we do have to be careful to make sure that we're diversified, even within our own business. If you're a workroom who only has one designer and that one designer walks away, you know what I mean? It can happen to any of us. So we all just do have to be aware when we take those on, the risk that we're taking on to have everything or so much in one big bucket. So I'm excited to hear how you are working around that challenge.
Yeah.
And to move forward, knowing that, and here's the interesting thing. It's not necessarily even an indicator of, or in most cases isn't, of the work that we've done.
Oh,
It's
absolutely not.
caught in the trap
Mm-hmm.
of some other things that are happening. So I'm excited that you were able to bounce back, and that you are, creating these opportunities to keep doing business, but hopefully to save yourself from a similar situation, right?
Right, sure. It's a growth opportunity, and both personally and professionally. And I think, I also saw it as an opportunity where we had been thinking about selling our house, and my husband's, he's a freelancer and he's been kind of on a roller coaster. And I just thought, you know what, let's simplify. Like, I want to be
Right.
able to pivot. We're also in another part of our lives where my daughter's getting older, my son's getting older, and I don't want to be tied to a house so tightly. Like, I want
Right.
to travel a little bit more. Like, I need some breathing room here. So it took me a while to get to that point and kind of reframe, what was happening. But I don't know. I'm excited about this next phase. Like, it's really kind of pushed some things that needed to happen anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about it.
Sometimes when those happen, it opens up space for something that maybe you'd been thinking about or dreaming about, or maybe that was not even on your radar, that you would never have taken advantage of with the other opportunity already there.
Yeah, no way.
You just wouldn't have done it. I know that, for example, I wouldn't be coaching and podcasting and doing the things I'm doing if I hadn't had major health issues that caused me to have to sell a company, shut down, have nerve damage to my arm. I had life-threatening issues happening in 2012, and then all of this started in 2013. So, sometimes those things happen, and
You were pushed.
yeah, pushed to change directions. So it'll be interesting to watch and fun to see as you move forward. So,
Mhm.
Jana, you're going to be at High Point Market coming up in
Yes.
the next month. Tell us a little bit about where people can find you if they want to search you out and all the goodness that you have to share.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, so I do a tour, a High Point Market Insiders tour. So I will be running that on Saturday, and that is going to be my fourth time doing that. So I love, love, love doing that. On Friday, you can catch me with Francisca from FCK, and we will be doing a talk about visibility, increasing your visibility with tools that you already have. And we'll be doing that at Universal. And then I have my tour all Saturday. Sunday from like 2 to 4, IWCE, Sophia Bennett, the editor of Vision Magazine, she's going to be hosting Windows into Window Coverings panel discussion with Deb Barrett and also with Jill Rogers. at the point. And then after that, after they do that seminar, I am going to do an upcycling with embellishments workshop, totally hands-on. We're gonna have so much fun. So that's 3:15 on Sunday. And Jill Seal is gonna be my right hand. And we have a special guest who is gonna be Natalie Riddell. So we're gonna have lots of fun. So everybody come and we're gonna do some projects there. And then on Monday, I just got asked, and I'm so thrilled by New Growth Designs to moderate a panel discussion called Makers from Startups to Success. And, that's really where a lot of my passion lies, is working with, being a maker myself and seeing this rise of the maker movement, people wanting things handmade. So on that seminar is going to be Trace Mayer from Museum Bees and Erin Weston, who you probably know from Weston Farms. And I love Beth Collier from Van Collier. So we're going to have a great time there. That's going to be on Monday at 2:00 at New Growth. So that's my High Point schedule.
Wow, that's a busy schedule.
Yep.
I'm tired already.
Oh, stop. And you're going to be speaking too.
I am. I'm speaking on Monday with Nicole Heimer. And so I think it's at 2:00 at Norwalk. So I'll make sure that I put links to all of that in the show notes. So if any of you don't have your pen and paper and you're not writing all that down, don't worry, you can check that out in the show notes. So Jana, where can our listeners find you on Instagram?
Yes, so I am Trim Queen all over, from Instagram. My website is trimqueen.com, and Facebook, Twitter, it's all Trim Queen, Michelle.
Excellent. That's easy to remember. And you also have a newsletter, don't you?
I do. I have a newsletter called the Trim Queen Chronicles. So please sign up for my newsletter. And I have like a kind of interesting thing to say. So you may know that I am leading a tour in Venice, Italy, and it's November 3rd through 8th. And I was really, this is a passion project for me, and I'm so excited. I have 7 people coming, including Caroline Hipple, the president of Norwalk Furniture, where you're going to be speaking. She's coming on my tour, and we're going to be working with makers all throughout Venice. But the point I wanted to make was I was nervous about filling up this tour, and I put it out, to my insiders from my Trim Queen Chronicles, and I sold out this tour, Michelle, in 36 hours.
Wow.
I was in such shock. It was kind of like that High Point moment of the 600 pounds of trim. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is in the right direction. And so and then since then I've had so many people, I want to come, or trying to sign up, but it is a limited, it's a very small group. It's a small batch experiential travel. It's 8 people. So if you are interested at all, you got to sign up for my newsletter, because you will get the first word of any kind of these tours and workshops happening. And I want to keep everybody in the fringy loop.
I love it. In the fringy loop.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am thankful to be in the fringy loop. And
you are. Thank you.
And Jana, I really appreciate your time today, and thank you for sharing your journey towards profitability, right? And then even the pivots and the changes, and following your passion, and showing how, I think one of my favorite parts, not that I didn't love this entire podcast, but I think one of my favorite parts was when you talked about when you walked in. A couple things that struck me: when you walked in and saw the trim for the first time, and it just changed something in you, like it grasped something. I almost feel like my visual is like this hand around your heart, just squeezing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then the fact that you didn't just feel that and walk away, but you didn't even know where it was going to go or where it could go at that point. You just started a relationship and a conversation. And I want to encourage our listeners, if you see something like that just grasps your heart, that just creates this burning in you, like it did for Jana, don't let fear stop you. Please just, even if you don't know where it's going to go, do what Jana did. Start a relationship. Just start talking. Just start building friendships there. And you just never know where that could go. If you had walked away that day and not done something with that overwhelming feeling, we wouldn't even have this conversation today, I don't think.
No, Trim Queen would not exist.
Right. So
Right.
that really struck me because that was kind of that beginning of this isn't even what I knew I was looking for. It kind of found
Right.
you. Um,
Exactly.
but then you acted on it. And so I want to just encourage our listeners, if something has found you like that, don't stop and think, well, nobody else is doing it, so I can't. It might be worth blazing the path just like Jana did. So again, thank you for that. I mean, I feel super inspired just from having the conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. And thank you for all you do and how you educate us all.
Oh, you're welcome. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks again to Jana for sharing her journey in trim. There's something there for all of us to learn. And if you're looking to learn from a coach like Jana did, check out my services over at scarletthreadconsulting.com and the Designer's Inner Circle. I would love to guide you in your passion. Make it a choice because profit doesn't happen by accident.